Hello and welcome to today's Pigs Alley Social. Today we're going to be painting a tropical landscape on canvas with a palette knife and oil paints. So to get started, I took this canvas which had an acrylic painting on it and I covered it with a wash of red acrylic paint which tones the canvas. It gets rid of what was underneath and it makes it a medium value here on this value scale so that we can see darks and lights better as we work. The first thing I did after that was I took my palette knife and some burnt sienna paint and I sketched an outline of my composition, what's going to be in the painting. So looking at this picture, I started in with the horizon line. I placed that. Then I put on the 3 palm trees. I added their tops, some bushes over here, little sand here, and now I'm ready to start adding the color, which is definitely my favorite part of painting. So I started to mix some sky colors. I'm going to first go in and do the negative space all around the palm trees with the sky and the water. So for my sky, I took some titanium white and I added in a little cerulean blue and a little bit of ultramarine blue to get what I think will be these blue colors. And with my knife, I'm just going to pick up some of this paint and start spreading it onto the canvas. Now I'm actually going to need more paint than that. When I use a palette knife, I don't use any medium, which means like linseed oil or any solvent, which would be like a turpentine or turpenoid. I just use pure paint and the brush, and it ends up being pretty thick and pretty textured. I just put the paint on in patches of color, almost like a puzzle, with these pieces of paint that are going on in like a mosaic pattern. And at the end should all tie together and look like this scene. So I like to see how much I can do with as little paint as possible. So right now I'm just going in with the darker blues in the sky and looking to see where I see them. And you'll see I'm using the edge of my knife to scrape them onto the canvas. I use the knife in different ways. Now I'm going to wipe that color off. I'm going to go in between these trees where I see a lighter blue, pulling away from those trunks. Now sometimes I let my initial outline dry first before I start painting, and that prevents that burnt sienna from running into my colors. Here, around this tree, and now I love when I paint in the negative space how it makes things appear. These palm trees are starting to show up here, even though I haven't painted them yet. And I also like the energy that the palette knife brings to a painting. It's just a 2-dimensional surface, but it's starting to feel a little breezy, I think, because of the way the strokes go on. So today I'm going to see how much I can do as quickly as possible. So I'm going to keep squinting to make sure I've captured as much as I want. And what I need to add now are some of these clouds. I'm just going in with some titanium white paint where I see the clouds. Patch these on. They're looking a little muddy now, but I'm going to go back and crisp them up later. Clouds do have lost and found edges, so one side of the cloud will be a pretty crisp contrast and the other will probably blend into the sky. The crisper edges are at the top where the light is hitting them. The bottom edges I don't have to worry about quite as much. So now I have the general idea of the sky on there. And now I like to really make use of all my paint, which you'll see I have here on a magazine. This is Departures magazine, and I happen to really like the texture, the thickness of the paper, and it's a great way to reuse something, recycle it. So now I'm going to go back into that sky blue color Mix a little more of it and add a touch of yellow, which usually turns out to look kind of like a Caribbean sea. So now that I have this watery color on here, I'm going to go across using my knife in a slightly different way, pulling the paint across. That looks a little too much like the sky. I think I better add some more yellow and some more white to lighten it up a bit. And I'm going to go in here closer to the beach side and just pull this paint across, imagining it's water. And then I'm going to go over here. Whoops, you know what? There is some of this over here, but right now there's some brown paint there that's going to make it too muddy. So another thing the palette knife is good for is removing paint from your picture. Sometimes removing paint is just as important as putting it on. And now I'm going to mix up a little more of this watercolor. And go in between these trees. And then there's, let's see, this tree goes down here and that tree's there, and there's a little V right in there. And this one's a little narrower here. All right, so now I've got the sky, I've got this idea of water, and I'm going to go in with some greens and get that landmass back there. To do that, I'm going to take some ultramarine blue and mix in some Indian yellow, which is one of my favorite yellows. It's a nice transparent yellow. Probably need a little more of it for my blue here. Again, pulling this paint across, maybe using my knife a little bit to make it look a little bushy. And then there's some more of it in between these trees. And some right over here. All right, now right here, I didn't go low enough with my sky, so I'm going to go back in with the sky color. And get the right shape for that land. There we go. And now everything is relative in a picture, so like I said, once I got that land on there, I realized I needed more sky. Kind of work back and forth like that a lot in my pictures. So now I've got this land, I've got the ocean. I'm going to add some of this greenery at the base of the palm trees. Mixing a lighter yellow for that. I'm going to use some of my Hansa yellow with a little bit of cerulean blue to mix a nice fresh green color for this grass here. And just loosely scrape some of that on there. Now I'm going to wipe that off my brush, refill my piles a little bit here. I tend to be very frugal, so instead of putting out a lot of paint, I just put out how much I need to get started, and then I refill my piles as I go. Now, I'm going to go in with some of the sand color. To do that, I'm going to start with a pile of white and add in a touch of yellow and a touch of pink. That is a nice sand color, but it's actually a little darker than the sand is in this picture. So I'm going to take some of it, mix in white, and now I'm going to go in and place the sand where I see it. And now for the sand, I'm kind of using shorter strokes with my knife. And by doing that, I'm preserving some of the red, which kind of gives it that sense of divots that you have in the sand. There's a little lip on my easel that covers up the bottom of the canvas, so I'm lifting it off to make sure I cover that part. All right, so now I've got the sand. Next, I'm going to go in with these greens to do the trees. There's a shrub over here and the palms. So I'm going to go back to that ultramarine blue, add some of the Indian yellow, mix it up, and squinting at my picture and then thinking about the value scale. I'm going to go in with my darkest darks and place those where I see them. And the tip of this knife kind of looks like those leaves on this bush. So I'm just gonna use the tip of the knife to apply these leaves. Over here I have to be a little careful to get around that sand that I like there. I like how bright it looks. All right, now I'm gonna mix a little more of that dark green and I'm gonna go into the palm trees. Now, palm trees are fun to do with a palette knife because you can go pretty bold with your strokes, pull the paint down to give it the frond feel. Some more over here. We've got this tree over here. And then there's one back here. All right, stuff is starting to happen. A lot of it, as Bob Ross would say, I think are happy accidents. I was a little sloppy here with my green, picked up some of the white of the cloud, but when I stand back and squint, it actually looks like light is hitting those palms. I'm running low on ultramarine blue, which tends to be a color I use a lot of. So I'm gonna add more to that pile there. I'm gonna get some more of my Indian yellow. And we're gonna keep working these palms. Some of the ultramarine blue, some of the Indian yellow. I was running out of paint right in here. I'm gonna go back in. If that was a little too much again, just use the brush to scrape some off. Some darker ones over here. Some darker ones over here. Now I'm going to do the trunks of the trees, which usually have a dark side and a light side. For the dark side, I'm going to mix some of that ultramarine blue with some alizarin crimson, tint it with a little bit of white. It's going to look purpley. And these are not straight trunks. Just kind of scraping down the side of it with my palette knife. This one in particular has a real curve to it. There it goes. And then this one is leaning this way. There it goes. All right, so I've got the dark edge of those. Now I'm going to tint that purple with some white to lighten it up. And I'm going to go in to see where the light is hitting those trunks and get the light side on there. This one has a lot of light hitting it right there. And then this one, the light is hitting it there. Now that light got a little gray as I mixed it, so I'm gonna try to make it pop back out. All right, and now this curve doesn't make total sense. Again, I'm gonna scrape a little bit of it off there. I'm gonna need a little more white to lighten up those trunks and the lights on the palm tree now. So the trunks aren't perfect, but right now I feel like I'm overworking them. And at that point, I usually stop that part and move on to something else. So I'm gonna go and mix some of the light green, taking some of this Hansa yellow and mixing it into that darker green I had on my palette. I'm going to scrape it off with the knife. And looking at this picture, I'm going to go in and put the light greens where I see them. And again, it's fun to use the palette knife to pull the paint in the way a palm frond would look. There's some lights back here. Over here. And this guy blowing in the wind. I messed up the order of my values here. It doesn't make sense that that would be dark. The sky, or light, it should be dark over here if the light's hitting here. So I'm going to adjust. A lot of painting is tweaking, adjusting. As I said before, everything's relative. So now that I've gone lighter here, I need to go even lighter in certain spots. And then actually these bushes I can't forget about. They have some lighter spots on them too. And now while I have this lighter medium green on my knife, I'm realizing that this dark island back here has some lighter spots on it too. So I'm just going to go back into that and add a little brushy interest to that island. And while I'm back there, I forgot about that little strip of sand. So I'm going to go back into my sand color from earlier, mix up a little more of it. And just go back in there with a little strip of sand at the water's edge. Like that. So now we have a sense of a beach back there. I might make it a little bit narrower by scraping some paint off the canvas. And now as I look at this, it needs more light right there. Another light here. A little bit there. And I want to figure out these palm trees. I think I went too cool with the color there. I think a lot about temperature as I work, and the light hitting that palm tree is a warm light, and that purple is pretty cool. So if I go on here with a warmer color, I think it should work a little better, definitely. Go in here with a little bit of that warm, and then along here. Can't see that one as much, and then it's a lot lighter over there, so I'll add more white to that. All right, so I'm at a good stopping point right now. As I said, I wanted to see how much I could do as quickly as possible and with as little paint as possible. And so I have a very good start here. I'm not really sure how long that took, hopefully about 10 minutes. Now going to go in and for about 5 more minutes do some finishing touches into some of this negative space that needs a little more work, but I'm not going to record it. We're just going to post the final version in a little bit. So now it's your turn. Hopefully you have an inspiration yourself. This is VACAs in Puerto Rico, where I happen to be in February. Hopefully you have a favorite vacation photo to work from at home and a set of paints. If you don't have oil paints, you could use acrylics, you could use watercolors, whatever it may be. Just try to get an impression of the scene on a surface and share it with us at #PigsAlleySocial. Thank you.